Welcome to PLZ Soccer's YouTube channel. I'm Alison McConnell, delighted to be joined by Alasdair Mackenzie, a Scottish-based football writer who's currently residing out in Italy. So, Alasdair, what's been the reaction of the Italian press to the arrival of Lennon Miller?
Well, a lot of intrigue actually, because there was obviously interest reportedly from a number of Italian clubs. I think it's something that people are paying more and more attention to since the success stories, I guess, in recent years of players coming from the Premiership, particularly Aaron Hickey and Lewis Ferguson. And, being 18 years old, being a full Scotland international. And then on top of that, the fact that Udinese have this incredible world-renowned scouting record, that people generally are intrigued by who they pick and choose to come and join the club at that kind of age anyway. So there's been a fair bit of excitement, and Udinese themselves, their coach, their sporting director, and everyone have been really bigging him up. They're not trying to downplay the hype. They've been calling him a sensation, saying he's going to dazzle, all these kind of things already. So yeah, certainly everyone's ready to see him play at this point, I think, because not many people have.
They expected to then that it would go straight in for that game next Monday night. I think it's Verona they've got.
Yeah, I doubt it. There was a Coppa Italia match on Monday night against Carrarese, and Miller wasn't even involved in the squad then. I think it came a bit too soon. I think they're going to start the season with him on the bench, probably having to fight his way into that team. I think he will get chances as the season goes on, but I don't think he's been brought in to be necessarily someone who gets injected straight into the starting lineup, because he's got a few quality players ahead of him. The club captain is one of the starting players in central midfield. On top of that, Sandy Lovrich, who's one of their best players, and on top of that, Arthur Atta, who's 22-year-old they're very excited about as well. Jurgen Kellekamp, ex-Ajax playmaker, and then another Polish guy that they signed this summer too. So there's plenty of competition for places, but I do think he'll get chances as the season goes on, because Runjajic, the coach, tends to start with a 3-5-2 quite often with three central midfielders, and I think Miller certainly will get chances from the bench to begin with, and then hopefully can fight his way into a starting spot as the season goes on.
You obviously know the landscape of Scottish football particularly well, and you've worked across Serie A for so long and in Italian football for so long. What are the big cultural differences that he's going to need to adapt to?
Well, the one thing everyone always talks about is the attention to detail tactically. Every player I've ever interviewed and asked that question to has mentioned this, because it seems to be something unique to Serie A and Italian football. It's obviously something the country and its football culture is very famous for, is the tactical depth and the able to produce all these incredible coaches over the years. I don't think that's going to be any different in Udine. I think in Udine he'll find things a little bit easier in the sense that it's a very international club, and the captain even spoke on Monday night saying that he's a Swedish player and that they speak in both Italian and in English in the dressing room. So I think linguistically he's not going to be kind of thrown in out of his depth. He'll be able to speak English in that dressing room quite easily. But in terms of style of play, Udinese aren't a team that boss possession that much. He's going to be able to get on the ball, but I don't think he's going to find himself with loads of time on it. So he's going to have to learn to play within quite a strict structure. He's going to have to improve his game defensively, I expect, as well. But yeah, it's that kind of tactical attention to detail to deal with the kind of what can often be a lower tempo style of football. Tends to be what people pick out about Serie A.
Interesting point you raised there about English being spoken in the dressing room, which I would imagine might just help him settle in. But in the wider sense and in the long term, I would suspect you would advocate for anyone learning the language just to facilitate and easing into the local culture and fully immersing oneself in it.
Yeah, absolutely. And that will make his whole life easier. To understand, what his surroundings better. The fact that there's a German coach there means that he's not going to be relying on Italian to understand the instructions necessarily, which is helpful. But I think you see the guys who have had the greatest success in Italy are the guys who have really embraced that the most. And it was amazing. I was at the Coppa Italia final here in Rome a few months ago when Lewis Ferguson captained Bologna to their first trophy in 51 years. And, within an hour of full time and all the emotions of that occasion, he's down in the press conference room delivering a press conference in good Italian. So it goes to show that if you put the time in, it is something you can achieve. It's a difficult thing. I don't think people understand quite how difficult it can be to pick up a new language. But I do, like I said before, I do think Udinese is almost like a helpful environment to be in, because he will be able to. He's not going to be in a situation where nobody understands anything he's saying. Apart from maybe the Scottish accent, which people might struggle with a little bit in Italy.
You mentioned Aaron Hickey, and you've spoken about Lewis Ferguson, obviously Scott McTominay too, Josh Doig. How important is it that maybe he's already seen examples of players go and be very successful in Italy just in recent campaigns?
I think it gives everyone confidence, really, because this has become a theme. It's something we've seen almost every year since Aaron Hickey came in 2020. The clubs keep coming back to Scotland. If they're not shopping directly from the Scottish Premiership, they're taking Scottish players from English teams as well. There's a lot more respect, I think, in Italy, and appreciation for the talent that does lie in the Scottish game, because there hasn't been a single failure of all these players who've moved over. The only thing you could say was close to being a disappointment was Jack Hendry spending 6 months on loan at Cremonese, but he hardly played, so that would be a bit harsh to brand that as a disappointment. So for Miller, it's great because he's got all these guys he can probably reach out to. I've asked some of these players before, have you spoken to each other? And they do tend to send each other messages and just to say hello and so on. And there's a bit of club of them now as well, so it'll give him confidence that he can do that. And a lot's made of the fact he's only 18 years old, but he's not the only one. Aaron Hickey was the same when he moved over, and Hickey, Ferguson, Doig, all these guys were between, I think, 18 and 22 when they moved to Italy. So coming over as a teenager, it can seem like a big jump and a lot being asked of him. There's certainly more hype around Miller than there was around any of the other guys, but that doesn't mean that he can't follow in their footsteps, because he's definitely got the talent to, and I think he's got a good environment there where he can settle in.
What are the big differences in culture that you expect to face, maybe just away from playing in the evenings? Like, what would be a way of spending an evening? I would imagine the culture will be very different to what it is in Glasgow and Motherwell.
Something that a lot of players talk about is the food, and Scott McTominay did an interview this summer where he was just kept talking about the tomatoes in Naples. But Italy is obviously a very big country, and depending on where you are, I think the culture of that place changes a lot. And where Lennon Miller's been going to in Friuli is a very distinct region, and very proud of its identity as a distinct region with its own dialect, very close to the Slovenian border, kind of tucked away in the northeastern corner of Italy. And bordering Austria and Slovenia very closely. And yeah, so I think that he'll probably find a new lifestyle there. It's not a huge cosmopolitan center. It's quite a small town, quite a community-based club as well. So I don't think it's necessarily that he's going to be kind of thrown into the glitz and glamour of a big city or anything like that. It's probably quite a relaxed place, to be honest, for him to play his football.
I imagine too, as a fellow Scot, you'll be quite excited just to chart his progress now.
Absolutely. I mean, I arrived here in 2018, and so I got here, I think, 6 months after Liam Henderson. And since then, there's just been an absolutely kind of non-stop stream of Scottish players coming over. And it's been great to be able to kind of, tell that story and watch how they develop and see that kind of that relationship grow between Italian football and Scottish football. And I do think that it's only going to happen more and more, really, because clubs are, like I say, they're seeing that value, and not just in the talent of these guys and the ability that they have to make an impact on the pitch, but also financially. You know, a lot of the mid to lower table teams in Serie A, they don't have huge transfer budgets to spend. And so they are looking more and more to the Scottish market, where they can generally get young players at a decent price. And in the case of Aaron Hickey, Bologna sold him for 10 times what they paid for him within 2 years. You know, Sassuolo bought Josh Doig for almost twice as much as Verona had paid Hibs for him within, I think it was 18 months. And so there's kind of plenty of reasons to believe that this link is going to continue, because clubs are, like I say, seeing both the financial benefits and the playing benefits of looking at the Scottish market.
Has the perception of Scottish players in Italy changed too? There maybe been a very traditional, almost stereotypical perception of Scottish players as being gritty, passionate, energetic, working hard. But there's more to their game than we've seen in recent seasons. For example, Scott McTominay obviously shortlisted for the Ballon d'Or, Ferguson and his captain and very successful. It's, you know, they've seen layers to Scottish players. It's not just this stereotype of what they may bring.
Yeah, that's true. And it is interesting that the kind of players who have moved to Italy and succeeded in Italy, they're not those kind of blood and thunder Scots that perhaps create that reputation, even though it is something you still see. You know, there is still this idea of what is a typical Scottish player or a typical Scottish tackle. Like Lewis Ferguson's one on Rafael Leao comes to mind in that Coppa Italia final, which kind of went viral afterwards. But no, I think it's seen as a positive, to be honest. That kind of, they call it grinta in Italy, this kind of like gritty determination. It's something that is really valued, and a lot of their own favourite players, like your Rino Gattuso kind of style players of the past, have possessed that in abundance too. But I do think that seeing a guy like Lennon Miller, who's obviously his positive traits are really his technique, his ability on the ball and so on, that aligns with a player like Billy Gilmore, for example, who I think really surprised people in Napoli with the impact he made in adjusting to a different position as well halfway through last season. And, you know, you get the kind of more dynamic and strong midfielders like Ferguson and McTominay, but balancing that with your more technical and slight guys like Gilmore and Miller is showing that there's different ways of Scottish midfielders competing. And it is interesting that the midfield tends to be the area that a lot of these clubs are looking at with Scottish players too.
Okay, well, we'll all be very excited to chart Lennon Miller's progress, but that's all we've got time for just now. Thank you, Alasdair, for joining us, and I think we'll maybe revisit you when the season gets a bit deeper. But as of now, thanks for joining, thanks for listening and watching.